Yeah, we had a speaker apparently ill, so I brought an extra presentation, and this is a fun presentation. I really enjoy giving it. Whenever I go to meetings, I try to present something that people are unfamiliar with so that they can actually learn something new and refreshing, and I consider this talk to be that. All right, the talk we're going to give today has history to it, but I want you to show, can you show the video first? And that'll be great. That'll give us a good jump. And this video is from a wellness clinic, a health wellness clinic in Michigan. And this is the crux of my talk.
With regard to UVBI, UVBI again has been used since I think 1919. UV and where it really got some of the scientific validity was with Dr. George Miley back in late 30s and early 40s. He was a surgeon at Hahnemann Hospital in Philadelphia. And in those days, this was pre-antibiotics. He was a surgeon, an obstetrical surgeon. And so he did a study, and he looked, and he was using UBI. UBI, again, is the blood is taken out, and it's exposed to ultraviolet light, right? And he used the full spectrum, but you can now we're using either A or C, UVA, UVC. But you can use the full spectrum. There's still some of the original machines around called NOT machines, very few. But anyway, when you do this to the blood, if you understand the blood and you look at the actual molecular structure of blood, is a red blood cell is almost identical to chlorophyll, the thing that makes plants green and that is involved in photosynthesis. And photosynthesis, as you may recall, is the sunlight hitting the plant and turning that sunlight, turning it into energy, converting it into glucose. Okay, so in order to do that, the chlorophyll must have a molecular structure that is what we call photosensitive. That is, it's able to pick up and hold on to light and to use it. And that's because of the structure of the molecule there. Well, our hemoglobin has the same thing. So it picks up the light. It's called a photoreceptive, photosensitive molecule. Picks up that light, and that light energy is used. And we found out that it stimulates, one of the things it stimulates is the endogenous or inside production of hydrogen peroxide and other things. So this UBI actually, again, stimulates oxygen production, oxygen consumption, and it stimulates the immune system powerfully. So when George Miley did his studies, and by the way, his studies were published in the American Journal of Surgery, I think in 41 or 42 after 5 or 6 years of clinical studies. That's a regular peer-reviewed journal. But, I mean, I forget the exact details, but people that were in mild sepsis, that is bacteria in the blood after having surgery, 100% got better with 1 or 2 treatments. Those who were in moderate, which meant that they were probably, their white counts were probably, had gone sky high. Now they're probably going down because they're probably getting fatigued and they're really getting sick. Again, had 100%. And then the people that in those days they called it moribund, but it's probably what we call septic shock now. Was only about 48% or something like that, which is no better than we do now, because septic shock, you're no longer dying from the bacteria in the blood, you're dying from the endotoxins that have been produced by the bacteria. So now we have different therapy.
That's good. So this technique, this science, was used in the 40s and 50s to treat septicemia, pneumonia, tuberculosis, arthritis. It was called the miracle cure. And right now, I'll just tell you the reason it went away was in 1950, the polio vaccine and penicillin was invented. So they stopped using this and went to antibiotics. So right now in wellness clinics across the United States, you can get this treatment done. It uses ultraviolet radiation. The spectrum is 1 to 400, but the UV portion is broken down into 4 components. And the 200 to 280 is the one that's used, and you specifically want to use 220 to 254 nanometers in these devices to do what we want it to do. So in 1801, Ritter discovered that light on the UV spectrum. So he's looking at the color spectrum, and he discovers these rays on the UVN, and he called them chemical rays. And then in 45, Bonnet used sunlight to treat tuberculosis arthritis. In 55, Rickley built a thermal station for a popular therapeutic doses. In the 77, Downs discovered by accident that sunlight kills bacteria. So he had glasses of sugar water in the window, and he noticed the ones that were in the sun didn't grow bacteria, but the ones that weren't in the sun did grow bacteria. So he started looking into how sunlight kills bacteria. In 4, Danish was awarded a Nobel Prize in physiology. He had a 98% success rate in thousands of cases using ultraviolet blood irradiation, UBI, to cure illnesses. Mostly they were cutaneous tuberculosis, known as lupus vulgaris. And we see lupus patients today in cardiac surgery. In the 20s, Oud reported a series of 100 cases that I don't even want to try to pronounce that one, but it's a cutaneous infection caused by streptococcus, and there was a high cure rate using UV skin irradiation. The hero of this technology is Emmett Knott. And when you heard the guy talking before, he said there's these Knott machines, and there's still a couple around, but he rationalized that the benefit of UV irradiation to the skin could be explained by the irradiation of blood circulated from superficial capillaries, like in the skin's surface, and he developed an irradiation chamber that actually allowed direct exposure of the blood to UV light. And this is him, and that is his machine. He had dogs intentionally infected with staphylococcus, and they found it in that study, all the dogs that were treated with UBI lived, and most of the dogs that weren't treated died. They found it was unnecessary to deliver sufficient exposure to kill all the bacteria. In fact, you don't want to do that. The optimal amount was 5 to 7%, and in the end, it's 3.5 ml per kilo. So if I were to do UBI treatment today on any of you that were sick, I would take 3.5 cc's per your kilo weight. I'd pull it out, I'd put it through one of these machines, I'd give it back to you. And that's what these there's 6 wellness clinics in Michigan that are doing this now. You can go there and have this lobotomized process done, and everybody that has it, they feel better, you know, their sickness is gone. And the first treatment on a human took place in 1928. She was determined to be moribund. It was a septic abortion, and she was extremely ill, and she was going to die, so they tried this on her, and she immediately recovered and went on to bear 2 children. She was done as a last resort and then responded to the treatment. Hancock and Knott had similar success in another patient with advanced hemolytic streptococcal septicemia. And we deal a lot with sepsis on ECMO, and it was noted that during or immediately following the treatment, the release of cyanosis, the relief where they got better, their skin pallor changed, their saturations went up, and we're talking within 3 minutes. The observations in a series of 75 cases of diagnosis with pneumonia, all confirmed by x-rays, all the patients responded well. They had a rapid fall in temperature, disappearance of cyanosis, and a cessation of delirium. I mean, this was 1940 and 1950. So Shadyside Hospital used it to treat these illnesses, including peritonitis, which I don't fully understand how that worked. Providence Hospital in Lincoln, Nebraska used it for biliary disease, pelvic cellulitis, viral hepatitis. Successful studies of the Knott technique went on into literature. They redesigned the irradiation chamber to give it a more thorough, uniform exposure of the blood, removing approximately 3.5 of venous blood, irradiating it and reinfusing it. And what they're finding out is that you don't want to do more than 3.5 because it kills too many white cells, but this stimulates the helper cells. So you've got these cells in your blood that are dormant, and the irradiation wakes them up, and then they're able to go and attack the bacteria. But you specifically want to have a peak wavelength of 253.7 nanometers. So Miley at Hahnemann University used it to treat these issues. These are some big institutions, and this is widely published, it's widely peer-reviewed, and it's FDA approved. And I'm trying to get somebody to do it on ECMO, and I can't get any hospitals because everyone's scared to do it. Barrett at Willard Parker in New York used it, reported 110 cases with numerous infections, up to 29 different conditions, and patients all did well with it. This is what the machine looks like today. So you go to Michigan, you go to one of these wellness centers, You go to Michigan to one of these wellness centers, and this is what the machine looks like. They take the blood out, they put it through the tube, it irradiates it, and it goes back in. They even have transcutaneous devices now where they go directly through your skin with it. So this is the UBI, and this is the wellness center, and I made this talk really quick and short just because I know that we're running a little bit late, but on this website they have clinical services, and this is one of the clinical services that they offer where you can go and explains what it is, and that bacteria and viruses and parasites in the blood sample are killed. This is in their data, and it's taken that this stuff's already peer reviewed, it's published, it's scholarly, documented, it's FDA approved, and this is what's in their literature that we already know. So it's my hope, this gets a little technical on some of the wavelengths. In extracorporeal irradiation, blood is irradiated outside the body, and what I want to do is on some of these pediatric ECMOs, where they get these infections and they want you to change the ECMO circuit. Well, no surgeon's going to go in and change the arterial cannula. But I want some of these, because I've seen babies die because we can't cure the infection. So I want to be able to take a little shunt line, calculate 3.5 ml per kilo of the volume of the circuit, not just of the baby, irradiate for that period of time, and then do that like every 3 days to see if the infection will clear. The FDA has approved 2 different types of devices. They've approved the transcutaneous that goes through the skin, and they've also approved the Theracos, which is an extracorporeal. It's being promoted as an oxygen therapy. What do you call the water stations where you have the super oxygenated water? They're kind of promoting it down that same line, and it reverses Lyme's disease. The ELSO task force in 2008 wanted to look at how we can start handling the sterilization of ECMO circuits, and the UV was resistant to polypropylene and polymethylpentene. There are some technical differences. It does degrade that product. So there's 3 areas that I want to look at on this. After you set up an ECMO circuit, has anybody seen what I call the R2D2s, the UV critters that they put in the ICU cubicles after a patient leaves? They'll pull the drape shut, they run it for 2, it's a bright strobe light. That's what this is doing. When you go to a barber and they have their instruments under that UV light, it's killing the bacteria on their instruments. Or when you go get a pedicure, they have their stuff under those lights. It's killing the bacteria on those instruments. Well, they took the R2D2 and put it in ICU cubicles at Mayo and found a 70% reduction in infection rates. When a patient left, they'd close all the curtains, they'd run it for 2 hours, they'd come back in, they would clean the room after the fact, and then they bring another patient in. Well, I was in a room next to a room being done, and they started it up, and all of a sudden, all the infrared sensors in my room started going ballistic. The nitric oxide was alarming, the my cardio help was alarming, the pulse ox was alarming, anything that had an infrared sensor, because that is in the same nano wavelength of the UV light that was being emitted in the room next door. I also had a cardio help where I was transporting a patient to Minot, North Dakota on ECMO. And it was a very, very bright sunny day. And we got out of the hospital, we're going up the ramp to the landing pad, and all of a sudden my cardio help is just doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. You know, the full alarm state is blaring and blasting. It's like, what's going on? Well, I couldn't even see the screen because it was so sunny. I couldn't tell what was going on. I said, just get to the chopper. So we ran up, and as soon as we got under the tail of the chopper, it went away. I couldn't even see what the alarm state was. And then I realized that following week, we were walking to one of our ECMO patients out in the courtyard in the sunshine, and it did it again, and I realized this is what's happening, is that specific wavelength in the bright sunny sunlight was hitting the venous saturation infrared sensor on the cardio help and making it alarm. So we called cardio help down, and we showed it to them. We witnessed it, and now they're trying to figure out how to fix that dilemma. Polypropylene fibers can only withstand 6 days of exposure. So when you hear that UV light breaks down the polypropylenes or the polymethylpentenes, that's not what I'm after. I'm after a very short exposure time. I want to be able to set up an ECMO circuit dry. After it's set up, put it in this light for a specific period of time, and then put it in a closet and call it good for a year or 2 years. It amazes me that we can't have ECMO circuits primed and ready to go for a 2-year window when we get tubing packs that are good for 2 years. Even plasma light is good for 2 years. It's like you're telling me I can't take this sterile circuit and put sterile plasma light in it, and it's only good for 30 days. So that's one of the areas we're trying to work on. PMP is more susceptible than even polypropylene. It can withstand intermittent exposure of temperatures of 175, so it's kind of ironic you can autoclave PNP several times, but you can't do UV light on PMP. It makes it brittle. And these are just some of the technical qualifiers. And that's just on various polymers. So UV can change it actually changes and degrades the physical properties of the polyvinyl chlorides as well as the PMPs as well as polyurethane. It breaks down the chemical bonds of the plasticizers that are in there. So does it have a future with extracorporeal technology with perfusion? I'm hoping it does. I hope that we can use it after we assemble a circuit and make it sterile. I hope that we can integrate it for sepsis management on long-term ECMO. And I'm kind of hoping we can do it for septic ARDS patients prior to ECMO placement. And I think that's all I've got.